Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our first mock assessment in the CMMC Action Series. And really, the goal behind this series is to put some action into CMMC. It seems like over the last couple of years, we've been talking about CMMC nonstop, a lot of debate and discussion. But with the CMMC program rule going into effect on December 16th, talk is over. It's time to get busy, time to put some action behind all of the activities that we've been doing. So that's my goal with this series. We want to show you how it's done, really make CMMC more approachable and inviting. I know it can be intimidating, but for a CMMC level 1 assessment, I think of the approach of how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. CMMC is that proverbial elephant, and level 1 is the first bite. So we want to help defense contractors just get started, see what a mock assessment looks like. So once they do have the requirement to self-attest to DoD, they'll know how it's done. And today we have our players joining us. We have some really experienced cybersecurity professionals joining us to demonstrate how to complete a comprehensive CMMC level 1 mock assessment. For future assessments, I open it up for people to, if you want to play, come join. You don't have to be super experienced. Play, join, learn. That's the whole goal. I'll give you an overview of our assessment plan for today. And this is to let you know how the mock assessment is going to go. And you certainly want to stick around to the end because I'll be sharing a resource with all of the registered attendants that they can use to bring this to your own organization. That being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to start off with our organization seeking assessment, and they're going to speak to our fictitious defense contractor. Hand it over to Tarek. Tarek and Steve will be our organization seeking assessment.
Welcome, everybody. Let's give you a quick overview of who we are, what we do in the defense industry. So welcome, everybody. We'll start here. We are a small company out of Kansas here in the defense industrial base, providing some off-the-shelf products to the base. And we currently are just on the level 1, and we will provide some information to the assessors that we have shared, and you see the same information that we have shared pre-mock assessment. And to give you a quick overview as well, we have a cloud infrastructure in our environment that we're working with. We have Office 365, some PCs, laptops using QuickBooks. As for the financial part, where some of the FCI contract information is saved for the invoicing and such. And we also have a managed service provider that helps us take care of this. Let's see. I believe that should sum up a little bit about the company and where we are.
All right. And Steve, anything else you want to add about the company?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right.
We have implemented pretty much the controls that we need to adhere to the level 1
Assessors.
to meet the needs for it. And we'll probably hand it off to Mark and Edgar for more conversation driving on this part of how do we meet these controls.
Welcome. We're glad to talk with you. It's me and Edgar that are going to be doing your assessment. Before we jump into the specific objectives, tell us a little bit more about your scoping and your boundaries and what is in scope, what is out of scope in terms of your company. Is everything in scope? Are there certain people that are in or out, certain technologies? Tell us a little more about your boundary.
We have 2 sales individuals that are in scope since they use our laptop and get the contract information for us. Then we have our operational side that would be essentially executing on the orders and delivery of it. So that would be in scope. We have about two departments that are not in scope, the front office and the HR.
Okay. All right, and we'll go through the details on that. But Edgar, any questions you have on scoping boundary before we jump in?
How do you reinsure that they're not seeing any of that proprietary information?
I don't have the network diagram, but essentially we have a firewall that we have implemented, segregated the networks for the folks that are not privy to any information. We have also implemented role-based access for the environment and within the shared folders on the SharePoint. And we have implemented 365 GCC High. We're hoping to get to level 2 at some point. So we have role-based access, segregation of networks for the people who are in scope and out of scope, for also the devices as well, that we have moved them out of the scope within the network.
All right, sounds like a good high level overview. Edgar, any other questions, high level, before we jump into the objectives?
No.
Okay, so let's hit these one by one. I'm going to kind of take the lead, and then Edgar's going to follow up with any questions he has. So tell us a little bit about your authorized users and how you've identified them, whether it's documentation, papers, Active Directory, whatever.
Our company has an Active Directory, and all active users are within the scope, and they all have approved roles with group policies assigned.
Okay. What about the processes? How do you identify those?
So with the processes, we use application whitelisting to ensure only approved processes and applications are explicitly authorized by the IT department.
Okay. Where are they identified? How do you identify all those processes?
That's a good question.
We have an organizational chart where we have talked about and put into place as to who needs access, who does not. We have myself and Stephen who go through the approval of as a new hire comes in or who does not. This is where we do the accountability part of it, to say this is the role that they have, this is where we give them access or do not give them access, and that is then forwarded to the MSP that essentially gives access to them to the certain folders or not, and provides that.
Okay.
How do you assure the MSP is following the proper procedures?
The MSP we have is also going through their CMMC implementation on their side. So we have gone through verifying that they have their own. Currently, they are on a SOC 2 compliance is what they have. And we are working, provided all the requirements and built a RACI chart about the responsibility, accountability.
Let's go on to the next one. How are you identifying all the devices that are going to connect to the systems?
All of the devices are in the company's endpoint management system, and the devices are specified with the hardware IDs, MAC addresses, and they're the only ones that will be allowed into the system.
Okay. Are there any processes to identify new devices?
Well, they have to be explicitly approved by the IT department, and that would all get set up with the onboarding process.
How about system access? How are you limiting that system access just to authorized users?
As I think Terry explained in the beginning, we use role-based access controls and access control lists for the networking, and those are enforced to ensure that only authorized users have access.
Okay. And how do you verify that and update that as things change?
Well, I think that would come back to the onboarding, and I feel like we have a good handle on that system. When a new employee starts, we have an onboarding process that needs to be followed, and HR department is very good at letting us know when it's time to cut off access. So we have an offboarding form as well for that.
How often do y'all audit those procedures or for termination?
Between Stephen and I, we take turns on making sure that process is not broken. We do it every 6 months, and also review it as if we have new employees added or somebody leaving the company, make sure the process is still working. We have not made any changes, and if it has worked or not worked, and also connect with the MSP, making sure they have also made the changes by the correct approval coming either from myself or Stephen.
Okay. How do you ensure that system access is limited to approved and authorized processes that are acting on behalf of those users?
So our company uses an endpoint detection and response system, EDR, and only approved processes are allowed to execute on the computers that are in scope.
Okay. How about your systems?
So are you talking about like servers or?
Absolutely.
Yeah, other servers. So for example, you have QuickBooks, you have servers and those kind of things. Then you have your MSP that's also acting. How do you ensure that all the processes that they set up are acting in accordance with the policy?
Our MSP is SOC 2 certified, so they have processes that need to be checked for that. So we're relying on the certification for the MSP. But we have the endpoint detection and response on all computers and servers.
Okay. What about ensuring that system access is just limited to authorized devices?
We also use network access control policies to ensure that only authorized devices are on the network. And it uses the verified credentials from the Windows Active Directory for internal network access.
Okay. Edgar, any questions before we move
I
on?
was going to say, how often are they audited on those access policies? And do you have a actual global access request when changes need to be made?
As far as the auditing of the policies and the process, we have the onboarding, offboarding, change of job procedures that we have built in, shared with the MSP, and that goes through first initiating whichever department, coming through either Stephen and I, and we do the approval. And as if somebody's offboarded or changing roles, that again comes back and we review those process to make sure the MSP is also following it. And we have tested them as well, just to have a different person submit it and follow to see if they already did that or not, or did they wait for our approval.
Sounds good. All right. As far as transaction and function control.
And Mark, can I pause for one moment? And for those of the attendees, feel free in the chat as we're going through the requirements. If you have questions that you would like to ask or would have asked if you were serving an assessor role or the OSA role, so you can make it more interactive.
I'll say though, if this was a real, we would get a lot more detailed in a lot of these questions just to make sure that we're good. But due to time, we got to go a little faster, just so everybody knows that we're not digging really deep, and in a real one, you might ask for different to see things and stuff like that. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the types of transaction and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute. In terms of, have you defined those types of transactions and functions?
Our company defines those functions for each user role, and that goes back to the role-based access control policies. And we also have these documented in our system security plan. Even though it's not required for level 1, we do maintain one.
Okay.
And those roles are tailored to people's job roles.
How do you define what is acceptable and what is not?
We've defined those roles with management to define what that user per role is allowed access to. And those are reviewed every 6 months with upper management.
Okay. Edgar, you want to take the next one? How have you limited access on the systems to match the defined types of transactions and functions that those authorized users are allowed to make?
You want to grab that, Tariq?
Yeah.
One of the couple things that we have also implemented is, outside of what Stephen mentioned with the Active Directory and defining who does what, we also have audit logs and implemented the SIM services as well that give us any deviations that may happen from it. If somebody's trying to access certain things, that gives us alerts on that part.
Yeah.
Just put in chat that he's muted.
All right. So I think we're good on this one, on B. So why don't you take, Edgar, why don't you take the next one, external connections?
Could you tell us about how assessment objective A, connection to external systems are identified? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
We have, within the firewall, first segregated the network into multiple things.
How often do you check those policies?
I'm sorry, how often do we check the policies or on the firewall that we have segregated?
Give me like.
Right. The connection to the external systems are identified. The first part that we were going through is our network is segregated based on also the roles. And we go through, for example, that I was using is for HR, we have created a separate portal where they do the job posting, download any application information, so it does not interfere with the other functions and other roles that we have within the organization. And as far as the firewall rules and the segregation of the network is reviewed periodically every 3 months to do any firmware updates on it.
Okay, so do you have Do you have a list of all those external connections? Like you're connecting to QuickBooks, you're connecting
Correct.
to
Right. So the second piece of that is we have segregated with and identified the cloud applications that we connect to, which ports that they're going out of and coming in, be it QuickBooks, be it the internal CRM that we use, or time in, time out. So all those have been identified each individually as well within the firewall as a segment.
And as part of that document, you identifying the use of each of those external systems?
Yes, it defines the application that traffic is going through and then what it's used for and which departments are using as well.
Okay. How often do you connect to those external systems or verify that they're still good and you verified that everything in your list is coming in or out versus actual? How are you doing that verification?
We have implemented the SIM logs for its system event logs for that so that we keep track of it and also do an audit for it monthly to make sure those are not deviating or if it's not having any new rules that is going out of.
Okay. And then how do you verify that the use is correct and that there's no abuse or unnecessary use of those external systems?
Yeah, I might as well take you there. We verify this using certificate validation, IP whitelisting, and pre-authentication protocols. We definitely check the logs every so often to make sure there's no suspicious connections and make sure that everything's legitimate.
Would you happen to have a hardware software baseline for your external devices?
The authorized devices, like the external devices that are approved from the company, are the only ones that can connect. So it's not like people can just connect with their personal laptops. So yes, there's definitely a hardware baseline for those computers. And then we have all of our software on there for like the EDR that we were talking about before.
Okay.
Okay. It sounded like they had good info for E and F as well and how they're controlling that, limiting it. So let's go to the next one. Edgar, your phone working better? You want to try and
Yeah.
get the next?
Yep.
So we're going to go to number 4, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Control public information.
Control public information. Individuals authorized to post or process information or publicly accessible systems are identified. Elaborate on how you're able to meet this control.
Yeah, that's right. Only specific people are allowed to post information. We have a marketing team with a marketing manager, and the IT administrators are authorized to post as well, although we leave that to the marketing manager as that's their department. And they're the only ones that are allowed to post publicly, and we have all these roles defined in the system security plan.
Do you have like a multiple approval chain for this to alleviate any type of mishaps or information didn't leak that's not supposed to?
Yes, there is. And that's defined in the system security plan, and that's up to the marketing manager to make sure that the people underneath them are only posting approved material.
A procedure to ensure FCI is not posted or processed on publicly accessible systems are identified. Could you explain this for us?
Yeah, so we there is a content posting policy that's it's up to the marketing manager to maintain. This document's actually referenced in the system security plan, and there is a compliance officer to make sure that there's no FCI included in the postings.
I would ask if we had enough time, how would you react to if FCI is posted?
We would definitely take that up with the marketing manager and both the compliance officer as well to review it and see if we need to take it down or if we're mistaken and it's acceptable to be posted publicly.
Okay. Yep, that covers those. All right.
I want to jump in
Mechanisms.
here. My name is Sushant, and I have a question on this. And I see that you have policies and procedures, which are administrative controls. Do you have any technical control in place to see whether FCI is getting copied and pasted out there?
So are we talking like DLP
Any technical
systems?
control you are implementing for protecting FCI being posted out there?
Yeah, that's correct. So with the Office 365, we're using the DLP. So it scans all like say emails come in and out, credit card information, that gets blocked, and then the security team gets notified, and then we see if we have to act upon it and talk to the department's manager. Like let's say it's the marketing manager sending FCI or credit card information or something, then we would take that up with them.
Derek, I don't think we need to get through all of it. I think this is just a good example. I mean, if we want to get through each of these, maybe we just pick one or two on each of them.
I think we should do that. Just pick one or two of them.
Exactly.
So on this one, I will ask on assesses identification of FCI data. I'll ask system users are identified. Could you explain that to us?
Yes, for sure. We're using a Windows Active Directory system. Everyone's got a unique account with their specific job roles, and as we spoke before, there's onboarding and onboarding processes that we use with human resources.
How often are you identifying role changes or reviewing those actual changes in the employment?
So it's in our policy that HR is supposed to let us know when people leave the company or if they change departments. We do audit this every 3 months to make sure, like, we look in Active Directory, and if we see an account that hasn't been signed into for a few months, where we're going to start asking questions. Why? Like, are they on an extended vacation, or did we forget to offboard them? And if we do find accounts like that, we would bring it up with that employee's manager to see if they still work there or if they still need to be accessed.
So you go 3 months without knowing users are activated when he needed to be deactivated. Is that also stated in your policy, your deactivation policy?
So not to deactivate somebody, what we do is rely on HR to let us know when people leave, and they're actually pretty good at it. What I'm saying is that just in case they've missed something, we audit it every 3 months to make sure that there aren't any stale accounts still active.
Okay. The next one, authentication FCI data. I'm going to number C. The identifier of each device accessing or connecting to system is authenticated or verified as a prerequisite to the system access. Can you touch upon this for me, please?
Yes, I can. So the device authentication is enforced using certificates. We mentioned that in an earlier control that we use that. And we have an endpoint management system as well. So only authorized users are able to connect to the network.
Do you have a list of these authorized users and their roles in an approval process?
Yes, that we do. And then we also have that with an Active Directory. We keep a pretty tidy Active Directory with the users. The OUs are labeled per department, and it's pretty clean.
And real quick,
Media disposable.
the access control requirements overlap with other domains.
Yes.
The one thing about processes that you have to remember just as you're doing this is it's processes they're acting on behalf of other users. And sometimes that's not applicable. Some teams are like, we don't have any of those. So that's always a good question. But all right, the media. Edgar, you mind if I take this one and just go through these?
Fantastic. Go ahead.
All right. So how are you sanitizing or destroying your media before you dispose of it?
Before we are on the sanitizing part and the destroying part, we have two options here. One, we have first thing, a company that we use for the shredding company who meets the NIST 888 guidelines as well. So if it's a paper destruction that is done, we have that. The second is for the electronic part, we have it as a degaussing and magnetizing it, then destroying of the media is how it happens. We get asked for the certificate after that's done as well.
Okay. How about if you're going to re-release it to somebody in the company or even sell it outside the company? How are you going to sanitize that?
Maybe I don't understand the question. You're saying if we resell the document, or I mean the product?
Like a laptop. If you have a laptop or a server that you're going to sell, there's still life in it. You could sell it outside the company. You could give it to somebody else in the company. But the point is you have to sanitize it before you release it for use.
Yeah, but I think so. With that in mind, we have a process within our MSP who comes out and goes through the whole wiping of the data before we assign it to anybody else or even destruct it. If it is a hard drive, we may just pull it out and just do the destruction of the hard drive and just get a new hard drive for that person if it's getting reallocated.
Do you do checkups on those MSPs to validate they're actually doing the work appropriately?
We have a every 3 month review with them for everything that happens, like process review and information review of what we have and what's happening with this. So it's a scheduled every 3 months that we meet with them. That's where we do the cleanup of the Active Directory, ask those questions on the assets, what has been added or removed. We get the report, what has happened within our network, along with the logs of everything that we do with them.
So do you retain that asset list after dissemination from the MSP?
We do on a printed format that is placed in our locked cabinet for now, and only has authorized personnel that we use the lock and key for that information. And when we get the following one, we destroy the first.
Okay, due to time, why don't you just tell us about your physical access processes, how the authorized individuals are identified, and physical access to the systems and equipment, and those operating environments are all controlled, and only authorized individuals are allowed to go there.
This goes back to our earlier, which is the onboarding process that we have. We use a very defined role-based access that includes the physical access within our company as well. We have a electronic badge system that allows in and out, and it keeps track of users coming in or not. At the same time, any unauthorized attempts to go into, for example, like a server room or the network room that we have, and somebody's attempting it, it would give us alerts as well for those for the physical access, along with the camera system that also provides the displays on the TVs as to who is where and what, tracking of that.
Do you have any equipment that's out in the open that unauthorized people can access?
No, I think we just have the check-in only device that you would see is by the reception where the guest would sign in on a tablet.
Okay.
How about your users' PCs?
Users' PCs are all in the office location. Practically everyone has a door within their offices that does not have out and open. And it's pretty much kind of groups up into the departments that we have. And that department is behind that door.
Okay.
And they have access badge that gets in and out.
Derek, what time did you want us to end?
So I would like you to start your out brief by 12:45. So we got about another 5 minutes to go through the requirements.
Okay, so I think D is met. Let's go to the next one. Edgar, you want to take this one?
Yes, I do. Manage visitors and physical access. Could you start telling us about a visitor escorting and how do you monitor their movement around the facilities?
So we do get individuals who are either salespeople that want to sell the product or others. So first thing first is as they come in, we have an electronic system where they sign into our to keep the logs. They essentially put in their name, email address, company, phone numbers, if they're a citizen or not. With that, we then assign a temporary badge that needs to go with them. And if this person has been backgrounded and has come to us often, we have a badge notification that says if this person needs to be escorted or if they come often, we get the background done for them that shows them they don't need to be escorted, depending on the frequency of their visits. That is logged as we assign them check in, check out of the badge for them. If it is need to be escorted, then the admin assistant and the reception person walks with them, brings them to the person they're visiting, and takes them to the conference room. And if there's need to go anywhere else, then that person walks with them. And that is all also recorded on the cameras as well.
Okay. Physical access devices are controlled. Could you touch upon that for me, please?
That's
So,
like
for instance, like the camera system. To
well,
elaborate a little bit more.
or the access cards.
Yes.
So the camera systems, the building access control is all behind the locked doors in the server room as far as that goes. As far as the temporary cards, the reception person has it in her cabinet under her desk, the lock and key, where she pulls out documents into that as to which card is being assigned to who. If it's escorted visit, that attaches with the check-in that they have done. And then when it's brought back in, she checks them out and puts it back into her drawer with the lock and key.
Okay, good. Edgar, you want to take these two?
Yep. Boundary protection, Communications are monitored at key internal boundaries. Could you tell me about how you manage this type of environment or boundaries? How it's defined?
Yes, we use a security information management system to analyze logs from our external firewall and the intrusion detecting system that we use, and that's monitoring our boundary communications.
How often do you check? How often do you check for patches and actual communication configurations?
Well, this is being monitored 24/7 with our MSP SOC team, and they let us know if there's any intrusions.
This is internal, so I think you said your HR team is out of scope and your other team is in scope. How do you manage between those teams? That's internal.
Okay, were you asking internal? Because I was explaining external, so maybe that was my bad.
Right,
Yes,
internal.
internal.
Okay, so we have a network monitoring solution that monitors the internal network, and it'll be the same SOC team that's looking for the same type of intrusions. So we have one, as I mentioned, on the external boundary, and one with the internal network that's looking at our firewalls, monitoring communications from the internal devices, and even our external devices. They're all being monitored as well, whether they're inside or outside the office.
Are they defined, these intrusion detection devices?
Are we talking about the devices that do the intrusion detection, or are we talking about the devices like the computers and the laptops that everybody's assigned?
Both.
Yeah, those are defined. We again, we have those in our Active Directory, and our policies for monitoring the devices are in our system security plan.
Tell us how you've identified the designated locations for malicious code and then how you're providing protection at those locations.
We identified where all these locations are for scanning the devices. So again, that's like our workstations, our laptops, and our servers. We're monitoring for malicious code and or with our antivirus software and our EDR. Let's
Could you
load a
tell
sec.
us?
Go ahead.
Could you tell us what device, what software are you using?
Sentinel.
That was quick.
Okay, so Derek, you want to jump in to the next phase of this due to time?
Yeah, so this next phase, essentially, as an assessment team, you and Edgar are going to share if you felt they met all the requirements that you covered, any observations you have in terms of maybe gaps. So just kind
Yeah,
of
I mean,
high level, give them feedback.
I think at a high level for this exercise, they did a great job. I think in a real assessment, you'd ask for potentially, is it written down? Do they have any documents they could show you, whether they do or don't? And then potentially, if they want to show you how it works, you might want to dig into some of those details. You don't have to on all those, but those are options. And I think in a longer assessment, you would dig into some more details on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Also, they did a great job. If we were sitting in front of them with more time, I'll dive deeper, especially into the malicious code to see how often they're doing it, the technical portion, especially with the physical, to see their processes and procedures, to know that they have an understanding of their environment themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, I must say, very impressive on both parts, the assessment team and the OSA. They put a lot of work into preparing for this, as we can tell. I really appreciate y'all demonstrating your expertise. Impressive. And just as a reminder, this was your STEAM assessment team. Steve representing the organization seeking assessment, doing the grilling. But yeah, I think they did a really good job. So just some things I want to like from a CMMC level 1 self-assessment. It is once CMMC program goes into effect, which is next week, the 16th of this month. Organizations that are performing their self-assessments, we want to demonstrate to you how it can be done. And in this case, this scenario, essentially our fictitious company, they brought in external assessors to perform that level 1 self-assessment for them. But we do want to give a disclaimer. We're not saying this is the standard, this is how you can do it, but we just want to demonstrate examples. I think that's a shortage within the current CMMC ecosystems where we're not seeing enough examples. So that's what we wanted to do here with this mock assessment. But big thanks to everyone who participated. And again, for future assessments, open it up. Anyone who wants to come and play with us, anyone who wants to serve in these roles, yeah, it's not a lot that you have to do. Just essentially read the the scoping guide for CMMC level 1, read the assessment guide, use ChatGPT to come up with some scenarios. At this point, I will open it up for anyone who has comments, anyone who has ideas for how we can improve this series. This is our first one, so we're hoping to continue this and make it better.
I believe we had a question on media control in the middle of our, I don't know if that individual is still
I'm
here
still
to ask
here.
that question.
So when it comes to media control,
Okay.
I wanted to understand like whether they have media access policy. Have they identified what types of media is getting utilized in their infrastructure at the moment? Any type of control over there? That will help us to understand like is that control is met or not.
There's one point that I don't know if Tariq explained is that for Part B of that, we would be following the NIST 800-88 guidelines for sanitizing media. So if we were to follow that, I think that would be sufficient for the control, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, sanitization is good, but identification is also something which I wanted to understand. Like sanitization can only be done after you.
So identification, I think probably in the process of probably documenting for these purposes, we would probably identify, I think as an OSA is we have these media, get thumb drives to, obvious is the laptops and others that are in that. So I think primarily those are 2 or 3 things would be identified, and probably the other identification would be, do we use the markings or not, would be the other part. I feel we should have that documented or at least share that, be it saying this is FCI computer, has the FCI, identify that. If there's a thumb drive that is being used, mark that as well. And if there's a paper document that has the FCI, have that identified as well. I think that's what you're leading towards, right?
How would you have handled like the asset inventory? Would you have defined like the asset inventory and had that categorized already?
Correct. I think the way I was thinking in my process as we were preparing for it is I didn't get a chance to finish out the network diagram, but what I had started out on it saying these are the ones that are identified assets that deal with the FCI that has it, and having the RMM tool and give the asset tags to that would be the best way to have that. Then the accounting person who has all the FCI, the contract information for billing, we would identify that software on that computer that is using it and the file cabinet that they may be printing and keeping that.
That would have led also to me asking, when managing your assets, how often are you going through your asset inventory, like on a scheduled basis? Do you have your guidelines and requirements and your life cycles already established?
Correct. And I'm open to other attendees jumping into it as well and share their opinion, which my thought was having that scheduled conversations with the MSPs, and we internally also having that document that we receive every 3 months that we would schedule that with them to show us, give us the asset inventory, give us the Active Directory to make sure we have all the same users, email addresses, do we have any stale ones that we have. So that would be the discussion and the conversation with the MSP. At least that's my thought process in having those procedures in place, and keep those handy as if somebody between the next meeting leaves or if we hire them, we would attach or have that user new onboarding information or offboarding document and a ticket that the MSP would share with us during that conversation. So we would keep updated. That's my approach to it.
I would recommend when working with like an MSP to develop some type of scoping process for disposal or some type of policy. The reason why I would recommend scoping, basically to keep them on the up and up, like grabbing a piece of asset before they distinguish it to make sure that the process is still done appropriately, and then basically interviewing one of the technicians, if you could put that in your SLA, to see if
Sure.
they know the proper procedures to actually disposing of the information, configuring a device, seeing their process, giving you a basic walk down, a walkthrough to make sure that they meet your compliance, because paper can say anything. But then when somebody physically do something else, it could be a breach, spillage, and it could cost you thousands and thousands, even into millions.
My approach to it has been within the organization having the RACI chart, which is the responsible accountability, consulted and informed, right? Keep that up, and as a organization having weekly meetings of some sort, make sure that is touched upon as well. But I'm open to other suggestions here as well. And it looks like Kayla jumped in, and MSPs having your own SSP, especially if they're following the CMMC and they're on their journey like Axiom is.
Yeah, definitely.
We got to keep in mind, trust but verify.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really what CMMC is about. Yeah, trust, and verify. But no, again, I just want to reiterate, I think y'all did a wonderful job and gave just kind of practical demonstration of what a comprehensive self-assessment would look like for a defense contractor or subcontractor. Hopefully that was very helpful.
We have a question from Louis here.
Yeah, I posted it in chat. Basically, at the beginning of the exercise, there was a question that prompted a subsequent follow-up question. And I believe it involved the access control workflow. The first response was, we're doing Active Directory. But then the follow-up was, do you have that map? My question is the response intended to be something that you have a visualization or an understanding of what that process looks like end to end? Or is it just a documentation requirement? What does that look like?
Can I grab this one?
Yeah.
In that type of scenario, you would like to have it mapped out from end to end. Reason why, because you have to speak to it. Because not only the controls are under the assessment, you're actually under the assessment. Because if you start fumbling your words and misconfigurating what's being said, correct me if I'm wrong, it will show that you have inconsistency in knowing what you're talking about and what you're actually doing on a day-to-day. And that's knowing your environment.
Awesome. Good to know. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can invite more questions or rigor from the assessors. So you want to
it could go down a nasty rabbit hole.
Avoid that. All right, well, we're getting to the top of the hour. I want to get ready to close it out. As promised, Aspire Cyber created a document. Essentially, we call it a compliance story, where it goes through each of the requirements and gives examples of how you can satisfy it. And it's role play. So kind of says what they did today, but it's in a document form for you. So for all registered to try to get that out to you later tomorrow. Hope you all enjoyed this series. Again, give applause to our assessment team, our OSA. They did a wonderful job. Looking forward to seeing some of you all raise your hand and volunteer to play for upcoming mock assessments. On that note, hope this was helpful, and let's get into action. No more talking and pondering and theories. Let's start exercising and seeing, okay, how can we satisfy these requirements and do it in a safe learning environment like this where we can collaborate and share ideas and learn together. Thank you.